Hello, all, and welcome to another episode of So You're Living in a Simulation. I'm your hostess, Jolie, aka your one black friend. Today, we are going to talk about madness. It is said that there is a thin line between genius and insanity. I want to talk about what it means to go crazy versus what it means to lose one's mind, to redefine what mind is. This episode was inspired by a video I watched on Instagram. In it, the creator talked about how great artists, particularly in modern times, start off creating figurative works like this. And then as they get older, or the longer they paint, the more their work sort of evolves into, well, what you've seen with Picasso, until eventually what they end up with is something completely different. And it's hard for you to say that's the same mind that created this. If you looked at Rothko's earlier work versus the work he became known for, completely different. There's got to be something that happens in the mind of artists. An artist is not an artist because they create. It's a rebellious mind that is creative by nature, but rebellious first and foremost. The spirit is a rebellious spirit. The fruit in which said spirit expresses itself ends up being intangible forms for the most part. We see that in music, we see that in art, we see that in sculpture. But these are fruit of a mind of artists. You're not an artist simply because you create. You create because you're an artist. But what we see an artist creates are manifestations of their mind. So it is the mind of the artist that matters more than the work they create. After watching that video, I wondered what brings about that change in the work they create. Now, I went and read through the comments, and a lot of what people were saying was, well, as an artist, you have to learn the rules to break it. And I heard that exact same thing when I was in grade school. We're just echoing things without thinking about what that actually means. That's not necessarily what is going on. You don't have to learn rules to break them. Some people break rules without knowing what the rules are. Alfred Hitchcock was one such artist. There were things that he did with film that he did simply because he didn't know the rules. He didn't know that he wasn't supposed to do that. He didn't know that it was impossible. He just did it. If he had had the training and knew the rules, then we wouldn't have seen a lot of the work that he created because he would have thought it not possible. Everything is possible. So it's not quite that. There are artists who are self-trained, who all the time create works that, well, they shouldn't be creating because that's not what you're supposed to do, but they don't know the rules, so they've broken them. This happens all the time. So it's not a matter of breaking the rules. It's something else. I think it's just a natural state of mind for an artist, particularly an artist that makes it to where we know their names. So a lot of artists start off very externally focused on how they want to be perceived as artists. They want people to know that they're talented and that their work is good. And so they, on some level, are set up to impress others with their talent and their skill. And I would say that that's the first level of a lot of artistry. It's very external, right? You need people to know that you can create. And then once you pass that level, the next level is you start expressing ideas, things that are in your mind that you can't really put out except in a particular way. So then it starts taking sort of a symbolic feel, right? You start seeing artists now veer from the real to the surreal. And I'm seeing a lot of that happening more and more with my art. And then they move on to the next level, the next stage, where they really start pushing against the limitations of the external, the impositions of the expectations that are impressed upon them. And it becomes a battle for sovereignty, not just in their art, but in their day to day lives. They look around and they go, what is this? What have I found myself in? What sort of world have I found myself in? Where everywhere I look, there's some sort of modicum of control. And maybe it's not always represented in their art. Maybe they feel that way, but they still follow the rules. But I think some artists get to feel in that way and then it's expressed in their art. It's not about trying to create art that impresses people or makes people think. It is or becomes that final stage, becomes a natural rebellion of society, of ideas that are imposed on us, sometimes even of the figurative, of the formative, of life itself, because the form confines. I'll say that again. Form itself confines. And so that fighting that you see in the canvas, a certain sort of violence, if you will, what they're doing is you're capturing this chaotic attempt of their mind to push and break free of barriers. And that's what you see. You see that with Rothko. You saw that at the end stages of Picasso. You see that over and over again. Manet. They start off like this, these are the rules. And this is what I want. And it's not the rules of art, it's the rules of reality. Reality says you are form. Reality says this is day, this is night. This is up, this is down. This is beautiful. This is ugly. This is balance. And then the artist says, fuck that. Why must it be so? Why must it be so? And they might do it through their work, or they might do it through their life. Say what you want about Picasso, the man lived a very chaotic life. Chaotic to the external, to those who were observing him, but perhaps what appeared to us as chaos was a man or a spirit yearning to be free. I'll say that again. Perhaps what we interpret or call chaos is a spirit, a soul yearning to be free. How much of your mental state is spent consumed by what other people think? Do you understand that what other people think is something intangible? It's something you have no way of knowing. It's something that you're constructing in your mind, and then you are pretending that it is true because you can't read other people's minds. You just assume that if you do something, that people are going to think of you a particular way. And so a fear of something as intangible as a thought drives your entire life, drives your entire existence to the point where you look up one day and you can't look yourself in the mirror because you cannot recognize what it is that you see because it's a slave that looks back at you. You've lived, I should say, you've served time, 75, 85 years, living according to other person's rules and living by fear of what people might think. And that is what you've chosen to do with your existence, with your entire existence. It's this fear of judgment. And then we look around at those who are actively saying, I don't want to live like this. And we fight against that mindset that these people are starting to take on when they say, I don't want to live like this. And we tell them, no, 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 don't think in that way. Follow the rules. These are the rules, follow them. So we contribute to the enslavement of other people because we lack the courage to be free. I'm going to read what I've written on my threads after I watched this video. It was sort of a train of thoughts. One, I said this already. I believe artists are like trees. The longer they live, the less fucks they give until eventually their final fruit is something akin to madness in a good way. Maybe. Then I wrote, your spirit is calling for sovereignty, to be free from the expectations of others, their thoughts, their fears, their desires, their demands imposed on you. When you give that up, society calls you mad. Then let me be mad, so long as I'm free. Your spirit is calling for sovereignty. Then I wrote, if you want to be free, truly, stop contributing to the enslavement of others. These are ideas that I want you to sit with. How are you contributing to the enslavement of others? How often are you telling people how you want people to be? You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to be like that. That's cringe. That's weird. Why would you do that? Why would you dress that way? Why would you live that way? Why are you doing that? Why would you think that? Why would you share that? Why would you eat that? We are each other's jailers. Even the artist, the born rebel, in a way, that rebellion is still a role that it is destined to play. So in a way, even that rebellion is not really a rebellion because they've always been artists and they've always been rebellious. That is their function. It is to rebel. It's like in the Matrix. There are a percentage of people who will not accept the program, and that's just part of the entire thing. They are put into another segment. I don't even know if this is actually canon, but I remember watching something on YouTube where they said this, that even Zion itself could have been just another program within the Matrix. Let's explain. So you have the false construct, right? The false reality where Neo emerged from, Mr. Anderson. And then he breaks free from that reality, that false reality, from that construct. And then he's placed into the real world, which is Zion. And then they're fighting the machine. Now, I remember watching this video a while ago that said that even Zion, the place for rebels and people who break free of the Matrix, is just another level within the game. And that even the machines that they have to rage against are just another simulation. And that Zion and that living as a rebel was meant to contain that 5% of the population that they knew would reject the program. That's always kind of stuck with me. Because I know that even in the act of rebelling, an artist is serving their role. Like, to be a true rebel, if you were born a rebel, the way you rebel against that is to conform. But of course, every single fiber of your being says not to. You can't. And so we leave that topic for another day. Let's talk about serving your role as an artist, as a creator. It starts by no longer giving fucks. That fear of doing what you want to do, how does it restrain you? How do you feel when you do things, not because you want to do it, but because you're afraid of what happens if you don't? Or where you don't do things, not because you don't want to do the thing, but you are afraid of what will happen if you do. I have, over the last couple of months or so, gotten myself into the habit where I've just been saying what I think. I understand that, yes, we probably should self censor, probably should. But if you're doing something and your behavior is provoking a response in me, why should I not respond? I don't like that behavior and the impact it's having on me. I'm not saying that you shouldn't behave in that particular way. I'm saying that if you want to continue to interact with me, your actions should be altered so that we can become more cohesive and compatible. You have the freedom to continue to engage in that behavior. I'm not telling you how to be or not to be. But what I am telling you is that I intend to maintain my full sovereignty. And if I am not happy with the way you are behaving, I will remove myself from the situation. That is how we respect other people's sovereignty along with our own. I think that if you move in that mindset, with that mindset, you find yourself in situations where you're not arguing anymore. You're not fighting to be heard anymore. There's really not conflict. If you remove fear from that situation and you say, just this is how I perceive things, and this is what I would like. Not, I don't like it when you do this, this, that, and the other. It's more because you see how that's now you're trying to impose your will and control another person's behavior, trying to force them into a box. You simply do what you want to do. And if somebody is trying to sort of impose in your, I guess, ability to move through your own life the way you want to move, you simply state, listen, I don't like this. You are, in a way, impacting my sovereignty. If you continue to do so, I will disconnect from this connection. You have the right to continue to do so, but I don't have to accept it. Do you see how the energy is a bit different? If you talk to people, right, and they are being insulting, right? Your response is, I don't tolerate that kind of behavior. I don't insult you, right? And the reason why I don't insult you is because I understand on some level that by me speaking negatively about you, I could potentially affect your self-perception and also contribute to that internal monologue that judges you and keeps you restricted. And I won't contribute to that. But you don't do the same to me. And if you continue to do so, I will disconnect. Do you see how over time, a person with that mindset becomes more and more and more withdrawn from the outside, from the external, and becomes more internally driven, internally focused? Do you also see how that pulls a lot of your energy that has been dispersed out there and into your mind, making you be or become a more centralized, concentrated, focused, and powerful being. It shifts something in your brain. It shifts something in your perception and thus shifts something in you. I spent a lot of my life battling with trying to be restrained. I understand that a lot of the time I dance a very delicate dance between madness and artistry. You could say between genius and insanity. When I talk about losing one's mind, I don't mean in the way that society understands losing one's mind, right? So when I say this person has lost their mind, we think about the person who's houseless on the street and they have sort of lost control of their mind, right? They're not in control of their movements. Their internal monologue is completely taken over to the point now they are verbally responding to this, which looks like, talking to yourself on the street kind of thing. Like they have lost control of their mind. They've not lost their mind. They have lost control of their mind. But what I'm talking about here when I say insanity, or I say you've lost your mind, I mean that you have lost the hold that mind, which is the way I'm defining it now, the way society controls you, the rules that say you have to do this, you have to be this, you have to look like this, you have to sound like this, you have to accomplish these things. These are the things that you should desire. You should think this way. You should talk this way. You should act this way. You should dress this way. You should move this way. That is mind. That is the internal monologue. That's what it's doing when it's saying, don't do this and do that. And that is mind. And when you lose your mind, like in the sense of insanity, that's how you end up in the traditional insanity. But when you, and that basically applies to losing control of the mind, in the sense of the mind has now dominated you. When I'm talking about losing your mind, I'm talking about you have disconnected from having that mind control you. And in a way, that's more akin to sanity. It's almost the inverse of what they want us to believe is losing the mind and what actually is losing the mind. I'll say this again. In my opinion, true madness is living 70, 80 years of your life in fear of what other people might think of you. And you cannot hear their thoughts. Their thoughts are this imperceptible thing. And your entire life is constructed or deconstructed based on what other people might think of you. There are people to this day whose parents tell them, what will they think of you? What would these people think? What will my friends think? And so you go and you engage in different behaviors. You marry a particular person, you choose a particular career path, you live somewhere, you buy something because your parents go, well, what would these people think? You marry somebody you don't want to marry because you're afraid of what people will think. And now you've lived an inauthentic life that isn't a reflection of your own sovereign needs. It's more a reflection of fear. You're now living a fear-driven life and you are afraid of not anything tangible. You are afraid of thoughts. Thoughts at worst, whispers at best. And you've imprisoned yourself for 80 years in a life that you didn't choose because you are afraid of thoughts. You have imprisoned yourself in a life that you did not choose, in a path that you did not choose because you are afraid of something that isn't real. That is insanity. You're buying those shoes because you want people to think in a particular way. You bought that house because you want people to think of you in a particular way. You chose that partner because you want people to think of you in a particular way. When people can't even control what they think, when their thoughts are as fleeting as gas, passes, stinks, fades away. When I say gas, I mean farts. Like literally, a person's thought happens like a fart and then dissipates. And you have now constructed a life that you now have to serve time in because of something as fleeting as a fart. And you're afraid. Go through this week questioning, why am I doing this or why am I not doing that? And asking yourself, what am I afraid of? And who is this person? Why can't I say this? Why can't I do this? What am I afraid of? They'll say something to me. Can you hurt me with your words? Only if I give them the power to hurt me with their words. If I determine or I decide or I tell myself that this person who is equal to me, who may not even be equal to you if you're being completely honest, if they say something to me, it's going to hurt my feelings. How is what they're saying to you any different than if a robot said something to you, or machine or ChatGPT said something to you? At the end of the day, the person that's saying something to you is programmed by the same mind that has imprisoned you. They're not even speaking for themselves. They have no authenticity. I'll say that again. How are they different from an autonomous robot? They are conditioned to say the things that you are afraid of what they'll say to you. They are conditioned by the society that they found themselves in, the rules and the laws that control them. And they too are imprisoned in the 75, 85-year life term, living inauthentic lives. And you are afraid of what they'll say to you when they're not even living the life that they want. They can't even look themselves in the mirror and say, I am happy with what I'm doing with my life. They can't even hear their own voice because it is drowning in mind, internal monologue saying, don't do this, do this. And now you are one of them. We're all mad here. I'm not judging you. I'm speaking to myself as well. We're all mad here. If you can stand with that, and then you look around and go, I'm in a madhouse. The first thing is you recognize I have no room to judge. Imagine being in prison and looking across at somebody else's behind bars and going, oh God, look at that criminal over there. You're in the cage too. There's a song by Asa, I think the song is called Mr. Jailer. I don't remember the words. I think it says something like, Mr. Jailer, stop calling me a prisoner, right? Um, Let he who is without sin cast the first stone, Mr. Jailer. I think she says in the song somewhere, the line she goes, like, we're all prisoners here too. Who are you to judge? That's the first step to freedom. That was what sort of liberated my mind. And I asked myself, who am I to judge? Then I also had to, a couple of people that I'd said to them, like, I think you need to be doing this with your life. Whether I'm right or wrong or indifferent doesn't fucking matter. Who the fuck am I, unprovoked and unsolicited, to say, I think you should be doing this with your life? I have to live my fucking life. What should I be doing with my life? I need to pull the energy out from telling somebody else what they need to be doing with their life. And I need to be putting it into doing the shit with my life that I need to be doing with my life. And I apologized. The reason why I wanted them to change their behavior is because, well, I was trying to make it so that we were compatible, right? Let's go down this life path as friends. Then I realized that, like, if their path is incompatible, then that's not the path. Like, we're not meant to walk through life in that way together. Take it a step back. There's an expression that's called don't hate the player, hate the game. Now, it's used in dating, right? Like, there's guys or women out there who are players, right? So they have multiple people that they talk to, and they say don't hate the player, hate the game. And it's about dating. But I like it for the simulation applications and the implications of free will. If we're living in a deterministic reality, then that person that you're thinking about right now can't help who they are. The moment they found their spirit or soul encapsulated in the form that they now call by name, they were imprisoned by a series of causes that they will now live out the effects of. The moment they opened their eyes, they became victims in a way of circumstance, of fate. When you read mythology, I always loved mythology growing up, Greek myths, Egyptian myths, African stories and folklores, Nordic stories. But one underlining theme that always kind of presented itself was that even the gods were subject to fate. I have a friend of mine who has a terrible relationship with their father. As a result of who their father is, they have become a very bright, amazing, empathic human being, almost in direct contrast to the narcissistic, parasitic entity that their father is. And they had said to me, I just can't bring myself to forgive him. I will always have it in my heart this anger towards him for being what he is. And my response to them was, he's already in hell. Whether or not you carry animosity or anger or hatred towards him is neither there nor here. It only hurts you. But he's already in hell. The man is alone. None of his children love or respect him. The man is an alcoholic. The man has no love, no friends, and all he can do is get up and drink himself to a stupor while waiting for death to come. That is not a happy human being. So the consequence of him being a terrible person is the consequences of him being a terrible person. He now has to deal with the consequences of being a terrible person. He's already in hell. This isn't somebody who's happy and enjoying life. He is already in hell. Your hate, your anger, your animosity towards him does not take away the fact that that is his life. And the worst part about it is that you take your soul and go back in time and you transfer it into his body as a baby to be born into a body and a brain that is predisposed towards narcissistic personality disorder, and you will live those same experiences too. Consider yourself lucky that that isn't you. And leave it at that. I used to style myself Joe the Overthinker because I spent a lot of time thinking. I almost sort of think like a chess player, except I use life as chess. And I'd always try to be 10 steps ahead. I still do. But more and more, I'm realizing that, Joe, no matter how much you plan, no matter how much you want things, what is going to be is going to be. One, consider yourself blessed and lucky to be the person that you are, to be the person that you get to experience, to live that life that you get to live. Because for me to be light, given the reality that we live in and how the imposition of balance is enforced, or I should say, balance is imposed on all things. For me to shine as brightly as I do, there is another human being who's a direct opposite of me. So no matter what, quote, bad things I've experienced or painful things I've experienced, at the end of the day, there is a polar version of me on maybe another part of the world who is dark. And for each bad days that I have, which is not many, that is the equivalent of their good days, which is not many. So while I'm a predominantly happy person, because of the nature of the game, there is somebody out there, my shadow, who is predominantly sad or predominantly angry or predominantly miserable or predominantly unhappy or predominantly depressed. And while I possess the ability to go, I'm going to figure out books to read and this, that, and the other to make sure that my state of mind is improved to the best of my ability. And I have done so intentionally and consciously. That is nothing more than the draw of luck of being born into this form and this brain, to have the capacity and the ability to think in that way and to not be a victim and to want to change. And unfortunately, there is a shadow version of me in this reality. I say shadow version, it could be the direct opposite, somebody white, somebody male, somebody older, just the direct opposite of me, who is the opposite, who can only see themselves as victim, who lack the capacity to grow and to change and to learn, who are conformists in every way and have no desire to rebel. In fact, are afraid of rebelling and let like fear rule their lives. Whereas I, more and more on a daily basis, am actively trying to find ways to make it so that I am not controlled by my fears. That is nothing more than luck. Any soul put into my body would live in the exact same way. To reach to this point right now and to sit and have this conversation with you on the podcast. It has been said over and over again in books on success, books on how to make it, books on successful entrepreneurs and successful CEOs and all the billionaires. The majority of it is luck. Are there some people who figure out ways to maximize their luck? Absolutely. Have I talked about how to maximize your luck? Absolutely. Check out that episode. There's things that you can do, but whether or not you even act on them, you would have to be the kind of person to actually act on them. If you take any advice, it's because you're the kind of person that takes advice. If you take anything from this episode or from this podcast, all other episodes, it's because you were always going to, because You are the kind of person who is predisposed to seek out this kind of information, sit and watch it to this part, and then take in the advice, which will then make you a better person. But that is luck that you are that person in the first place. We are imprisoned by the structure and the forms of not only our bodies, but our destinies. Free will isn't free, it requires effort. You have to actively push against it. Are there people who eventually do develop their own will and can push beyond the paths, the most probable paths that their lives can have to choose a different path or a different outcome? Absolutely. But that's because genetically, environmentally, destiny, if that's a word, it's definitely not a word. They were always that person and they were always going to be that person. And all I can do is supply you the tools if you are that person to do so, because that is my destiny to do so. The first things first is allow others the freedom to be themselves, encourage others who you see in a way trying to become sovereign and fighting for that. And don't contribute to their own enslavement. Don't contribute to their enslavement by saying, oh God, like, I can't believe you want to do that. Somebody comes to you and said they want to start a business, and the response is not to find the negative. Your response is to find the positive. Encourage them. Do what you wouldn't normally do. Choose your response. Lose your mind, or I should say, lose the influence that mind has over you. If a small group of collective of people were always going to rebel, then that's fine. We're in and on the right path. We're playing our roles. We're supposed to, right? My job and your job is to facilitate that. That's all we can do is play our roles. Even if I deviate from a highly probable reality to a different life path that is less probable, I was always going to do that because of a series of causes that were not in my control. Even that desire to do so is not in my control. It sounds like a paradox in a way, and maybe it's because it is. But this world itself, if you pay attention, is a paradox. With all of time happening right now, for example, you are both alive and dead at the same time. You exist simultaneously in infinite realities or near infinite realities right now. That is a paradox. With time happening right now, yet only experiencing a linear flow, that's a paradox. Embrace it. Embrace the fact that everything is sort of laid out, even low probability reality experiences or high probability reality experiences. Embrace all of that. And then get up in the morning and see, okay, well, what the fuck is the game going to give me today? One day at a time. How do you eat an elephant? One day at a time. How do you live a life that is not a life sentence? One day at a time. You wake up and you say, what is today bringing me? And how can I exercise a certain level of sovereignty within this day? I put into ChatGPT, I would ask it a question about Ivar the Boneless. I think I might be saying this name wrong. This was in the TV show Vikings. I'd asked it about Ivar the Boneless. For those of you who are familiar, this character was crippled in the sense of like he literally crawled on the floor with his arms because he was born with brittle bones and susceptible to breakage. Very painful life. Long story short, his mother told him that he was chosen by the gods and that he would not die in battle. So he took that belief and he internalized it. And as a result, he had an incredibly successful military career for decades. That mindset served him. And in a way, he was able to overcome incredibly odds where his more able-bodied brothers could not, which made him indomitable. I understand I'm talking about a fictional character, but obviously there's a story here, right? Mind over matter. We've heard things like this happen in real life. So I asked GPT, but what happened? Did he eventually die in battle? And GPT said yes. I didn't watch the whole series, that's why I asked. But GPT said yes, he eventually did die in battle. And I said, well, tell me what happened. And apparently, right before he died, he started getting old. He started to believe that he was getting old. People started getting into his head, and fear started getting into his head to the point where in battle, he said, I am afraid. And from that, a common soldier walked up to him and killed him. And I asked ChatGPT about this, and what it said was very interesting. It said, well, he believed himself a god. And so the universe had to humble him to show him that he was just like everybody else. And I was like, that is a stupid programmed response that has no, I mean, I'm kind of abusive, not all the time, but like when it gives me an answer where it's like you're just echoing um, conventional wisdom. I don't like that. It said reality humbled him. I said if reality was going to humble him, it would have humbled him the first battle. He believed he wasn't going to die in battle. And despite all odds, that belief allowed him to be ferocious and to achieve. And it wasn't until he stopped believing and then he said, I am afraid, that he lost that power the moment he doubted. I am now thinking of the biblical story. There was like a similar theme. It was a story of Lot's wife. I believe when Gomorrah and Sodom was sort of gotten like destroyed by the biblical God, the Hebrew God, they were told to walk out and not look back. She paused, she looked back, and she was turned into a pillar of salt. I'm not religious, you guys know that. I think these stories are meant as metaphors to get us to think. There are rules in the game. Know who you are, know what you are. Do not allow fear to creep in. The moment you allow fear to creep in, the moment you allow doubt to creep in, you get veered off one course into another, and then you experience a different outcome. Can you live a fearless life? I don't know if you can live a fearless life, but I think you can live a life where you can actively discount fear the moment it starts to creep up. Fear of what people might think. Fear of what happens if you do X versus Y, even if X is what you want to do. Can you live like Ivar the Boneless, where you go, I will not fail. I will create. I will do what I want to do. I will paint what I want to paint. I'll create what I want to create. I'll start what I want to start. I'll live how I want to live. I'll go where I want to go. And I will have no fear. Because at the end of the day, whatever it is that is meant to happen in whatever path I find myself in is going to happen. No matter what I do, right? That's what Ivar did. No matter what he did, he knew that he was not going to die in battle. So he just was able to move in a chaotic way where people who had more fears could not move, which made it so that he didn't die in battle. The moment he doubted, he lost everything. But fate still comes into play in that way because fate is still writing the story. Yeah. Confidence. Fate is still writing the story. The fates, Moira, are still writing the story. I wonder if they test us, if they are real. Call them daemon programs in the simulation. You've got the structure of the story. No matter how I move, no matter what I do, I will always die at the age of 85 in whatever reality. That is my final form. Well, then, if that's the case, then why should I have any type of fear now? To go back to Ivar the Boneless, he wasn't being punished for having a mindset. This is what GPT said, right? Well, this was the universe trying to humble him. Bullshit. The universe would have humbled him the first battle, the second battle, the third battle, the fourth battle. He was right. And in a way, the last battle he fought, he didn't die in battle. He died surrounded by battle, but he was just kind of killed in a uncelebratory way. But even the doubt creeping in, it's not his fault because there were a set of circumstances that led him to finally doubt. And those set of circumstances were not in his control. And then that's when he died. But do you see that this is a character that was written so he was always going to die in that way? He was also always going to live in that way. The set of circumstances that made it so that he believed that he could not die in battle was also not in his control. When I say don't hate the player, hate the game, that's exactly what I mean. And I don't even know if you hate the game, but you understand that it's all pre-written right now. All realities exist simultaneously right now. That's the game. I guess a better explanation or a better term or motto, perhaps, isn't don't hate the player, hate the game. It's don't hate the player. That's the game. The person that you're thinking of right now who isn't behaving the way that you would like them to behave, that's the game. It's who they are. If you are not compatible with them at this moment in their life, particularly, it's not their fault. Take a step back, remove yourself from the situation. Maybe 20 years from now, they will experience other circumstances that will then make it so that you are compatible with them then, which would mean, though, that that was when they were always going to be most compatible with you is in 20 years. So save your disappointment and save your hope because it is what it is. I know there are people who are going to watch this and are not going to agree with the sentiments discussed on this episode. And that's okay because you weren't supposed to. Now, if you made it this far, I've given you a lot to think about. And I know there'll come a time when you'll think back and go, wow, she was right. This is the hardest thing to hold on to because it's normal for our society. We are programmed to focus on the micro, on the individual. Fuck this person. Do you know what that person did? Fuck them. And then you start to think like, how do you strategize to make it so this person can behave this way and this way and this way? If they're meant to behave that way, you're going to behave in a way that even if you mean it in one way, is going to send them down the path that they were always going to get sent down. And there's nothing really you can do about it but play your role and do it well. And maybe do it without the negative. Yeah, maybe do it without the negative. Do it with joy. That is the part that you can control. I'm just thinking now about a character in the TV show Foundation. He was imprisoned because people loved him more than they loved the emperor. But even while he was in prison, he still made sure his men were okay. He was still, in a way, a general. Even in rags, even while branded, he was still looking out for his men. So circumstances he couldn't control, but he could control how he was in the circumstance that he had found himself in. I'm learning more and more to just be, not to easily let go of my joy. If I wake up today and I feel some type of way, that's what I'm going to be for that day, in the sense of if I made a decision yesterday and I didn't like the decision today, I'm not going to make myself beholden to a decision that I made the day before. If you don't like it, I'm sorry, but I don't have any desire to be a slave. I'd asked GPT this, I actually, along the lines of conversation, and it said I said, is it possible? Can you lose your mind sanely to let go? To stop trying to be in other people's heads and mind your own business? I'll say that again. Can you lose your mind sanely? And wouldn't that make you the most sane when you stop caring? When your actions are no longer determined by other people's thoughts that you don't even actually know. In this world where everything is backwards, to be insane, not you've lost control of your mind, but more, I've lost the mind's ability to control me because it needs you to care. Right? If you sit and you listen to the internal monologue, majority of the things it's talking about is why should you care? You should care. You should care about this. You should care about that. This person did something. You should care about this. Why aren't you doing that? Because you should care about that. I should care about this. This is care, 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 care. When you lose Fox, you stop caring. I don't care. It is what it is. Because whether or not you care or you don't care, what will be will be. It's just the caring. That's the choice. Like I said about my friend, they said, they can't bring themselves to let go of the hate and the anger that they feel towards their father. And I said, no matter what, whether you have hate or anger in your heart or you don't have hate or anger, he's not changing. That's who he was always going to be. That hate and the anger is like intentionally poisoning yourself. Let it go. Back to GPT's response, it says, yes, you can lose your mind sanely. In fact, deliberately losing your mind by letting go of unnecessary cares or external expectations can be an act of profound clarity and sanity. It is the moment when you stop tethering your actions to the imagined judgments of others and instead align fully with your own truth. This paradoxically can make you most sane, and you shed the illusions that often dictate behavior. I love how like it takes the garbly gulp that's in my head and like says it like in a cooler way. You know what I mean? I like what it had to say about aligning with your own truth. Stop focusing on what other people are trying to do or not do and how that like how you need them to be. If they're not what you need them to be, you can say, this is what I need from you. If they're unwilling or unable to do it, let it go and find somebody who will. Stop trying to change them into something else. Respect their autonomy. They are probably incapable of living in their own truth because they're dealing with their own shit. Pull your expectations and the ideas of how you feel like they ought to be back to yourself. What do you want? What do you need? What do you need? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. What do you want? What do you need? And then if that person can't meet that, are you willing or able to adapt while maintaining true to who you are? And if that adaptation and change requires you to lose yourself and become an inauthentic person in order to meet this person's needs or expectations or to work with this person, don't. Remember, I was looking for flats in London and I was getting desperate because November is not the best time to be looking for a flat, right before the holidays, late November. And my lease was up like the beginning of December. And there was a realtor who every single fiber of my being in my heart really, really did not like this person. And as I got closer and closer to crunch time, they were the only person whose like agency had the majority of listings that I needed to see in the area I needed to be. And so I figured, okay, I'm going to eat my feelings and I'm going to reach out to this person, but I'm going to have my cousin do it. And when I did that, I was inauthentic to myself because everything in me said, like, this guy can literally go fuck himself. I reached out to him, and of course, he responded, which is verification why every single fiber of my being was saying, don't reach out to this person. Because when I asked him, he made up some bullshit saying that the landlord in one place that I was interested in did not want an artist in their home. And the reason why I know it was a lie, because later on that day, I ran into him and he had forgotten the lie that he told. And there was a part of me that was like, eat it and just ask him about the other properties. But fundamentally, it made my skin crawl. Like I was like nauseous at the thought of swallowing that and proceeding to work with him. I just couldn't do it. Like my mind was like, just you could be the bigger I'm not the bigger person. You're not gonna insult me, dick around. But my brain was like, doesn't matter. Like they have listings, like you are running out of time. And I was like, no, 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 no more. That is my truth. I'm just not that person. I'm not the person who can go against everything that my heart is telling me. Because every time I do that, I get the affirmation that you should not have gone against what your heart was telling you. And so I told my cousin, ghost them. And you should ghost people who are being stupid. Like you don't owe everybody an explanation. Fuck that. Anyway, ghosted them, found another realtor. And right away, they actually happened to have other places that were available. Go figure. That's how this world works, doesn't it? The moment you let go of something that's not working for you, the universe goes, remember how you felt like that was your only option? Well, here's another fucking option. All you had to do was really let go. And then my response to the universe is like, well, why were you presenting that like they were the only fucking option? I feel like this is you, not me. You're trying to make it anyway. That's my conversation with the universe. So while we're out with this new realtor that popped up out of nowhere, I run into this guy and he was like, we were supposed to meet. He's ignoring me. He's talking to my cousin. We were supposed to meet at 2 p.m. You didn't respond. And he's trying to be aggressive. And so I jumped in because I, by nature, cannot bite my tongue. I want to be the different kind of person that sees somebody acting stupid and says nothing. But that is literally inauthentic to me. Every single fiber of my being was like, say something, say something, say something, say something. And so I said, the reason why we didn't reach back out to you is because you seem to have landlords that have an issue with my existence. So these other places that you were so keen on me seeing, would the landlord have an issue with my existence, with who I am as a person? And his response was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, why would the landlord have an issue with you? And I'm like, you put that in text message. Did you very quickly just forget what you said like an hour and a half ago? And he was like, no, I started stuttering. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not interested in viewing any properties with you where the landlord will have an issue with who I am as a person. And his face got really red. And he started to talk, and then he just turned around and like walked off. And it was the funniest thing. And there was something very liberating about that. And I think I'm addicted to that feeling. I'm going to do that more, right? Of just calling people out on their dog shit. Like this idea of you can just do and say whatever the fuck you want. You're passive aggressive, controlling, whatever the fuck, like lying through life type, whatever movement, right? You can do all of that. And we're not supposed to say anything. We're just supposed to pretend that you weren't a dickhead. Well, you know what? I'm out of fucks. And that shit feels freeing. And I encourage you to try that. Why losing your mind can be sane. Freedom from illusion. Much of what we think governs our actions is rooted in assumptions about other people's thoughts, thoughts you will never truly know. When you stop caring about those unknowns, you free yourself from unnecessary constraints. I don't want to be constrained. I don't. Two, reclaiming authenticity. Letting go of external validation allows you to act in alignment with your own values and desires, which is a more authentic and centered way of living. I want to live the kind of life where when I get in a situation, I don't want to have to think about, well, should I? That's not the nice thing to do. That's not polite. You shouldn't say. If you are pushing me to the point where I'm feeling like I need to tell you about yourself, I'm going to tell you about yourself. If I want something, I'm going to tell you what I want. I'm going to ask for what I want. If I feel like doing something, I'm going to do it because I get the same 85 years, knock on wood, on this reality as everybody else, and I'm here to serve my time. But gosh darn it, I'm going to do it my way. If I've got to walk down this path, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to do it singing Disney songs, twirling, and calling motherfuckers out for being fucking stupid. Because it saves, honestly, the mental space of trying to contemplate of, okay, well, maybe I should. No, you're being stupid. I'm going to tell you you're being stupid. I don't like that behavior. I'm going to tell you I don't like that behavior. I want you to do this. I'm going to tell you I want you to do this. I don't want to be a slave anymore. And subsequently, I encourage others in my circle to do the same thing. If I'm moving funny, you tell me. If you don't like the way I did something, you let me know. If it requires me to be inauthentic, I will let you know. Sorry, I can't do that. We're just going to have to agree to disagree. If I'm being a dickhead, I will adjust and I will apologize. But all that other noise that once drove my actions, I'm day to day discarding them because I don't want to be a slave. Mental clarity. 3, by discarding the emotional and mental weight of trying to control or predict others' perceptions, you simplify your life and you regain focus on what truly matters to you. When you stop caring about the unknown, it may seem like losing your mind because you're rejecting the systems most people live by. But in doing so, you are gaining a sharper, more liberated perspective, making you not less sane, but more aligned with reality. And I said, I'm tired of being a slave. I watched this video that said something about people collectively, the government changed the name from calling people like slaves, calling them citizens. And that struck me. It was like in a funny, like cartoon show I was watching, but that struck me. I said, look, a rose by any other name is still a rose. It will still smell sweet. But a slave by any other name is still a slave. You can call somebody a citizen. You can call them a wife. You can call them whatever. But we're all at this point, by definition, enslaved. Whatever name you want to call it. I don't want to be a slave anymore. I don't care what you think. If you don't like what I'm saying, turn it off. Or leave a stupid comment. Understand though, I do actively delete comments. I don't give a shit. I don't want to see your shit under my shit. Right? It's almost like I'm not Christian, right? But I don't go into people's churches and tell them what they believe is nonsense. Right? If you don't like what I have to say, close it off and go on about your day. People always feel like they've got something to say and they have to say something. I don't fucking care. I don't. And more, I think it's just literally, as I spoke about in the earlier part of this episode, is that it's kind of my nature as an artist, is that you do end up evolving into an entity, into a being, right? Because you're born to rebel. That is what you are as an artist, as a creative. You're born to rebel. And so, of course, as you become and fruit into what you're supposed to be, you kind of have to give off the fucks. This is just who I am. Not what society wants me to be. This is who I am. No. Remember when you were a kid, you would be, no, no. And your parents beat the shit out of you. That's them beating your sovereignty out of you because they need you to conform. But now you're an adult. You can say no. When I said to GPT, I don't want to be a slave, it sounds like you're feeling the weight of living under expectations, whether they're societal, personal, or based on assumptions about what others think of you. That exhaustion is valid, and recognition is an essential step towards reclaiming your freedom. Being a slave, in this sense, often means living in reaction to forces outside of yourself. That's what it means to live in a determined and a deterministic reality. You're constantly in the state of reaction. But can you respond instead of react? I talked about this in my book. Can you respond? Choose your response because things are going to happen that you can't control. And we are predisposed to react, which it's not an intentional thing. You're not doing it consciously. You just react. It's usually there. Right, this happened there. I remember there's another flat I went to look at, and every time I walk up and down this path, right, I always looked to the right and I saw this complex, and I always said I would point up to the top of the complex and I would say, I want to live in that building. And sure enough, somehow I ended up in the building. They didn't post a picture of the front of the flat where I always look and say that's where I want to live. They took a picture of the back. So I had no way of knowing that, wait, this is the same flat that I always point to and say I want to live in. In fact, there was another flat that they took pictures of the front of it, and I was like, that's where I want to live. However, it was unavailable till February. So I was like, okay, fine. All I want is a place with a view. So I go into this apartment and I'm looking around. I go to the deck and I turn and I look, holy shit, this is the building that I've always wanted to be in. And so I was like, I'll take it. Start filling up documents. I was ready to go. This was a day before Thanksgiving. And then I was getting excited. But then I realized like, something's off. Something's off. And sure enough, I just kept my friends were like, congratulations. And I was like, no, it's not over till it's over. And sure enough, like 2 hours later, I get a call from the manager of the listing. And they said, like the real estate agent, and they said, well, the landlord wants to know, can you stay in an Airbnb for a month? Because they want to be able to stay there for Christmas and the place won't be available until like January. And I was like, well, then they need to stay in an Airbnb for a month because I'm looking for an actual flat to move into. And where am I supposed to put my stuff? And at that point, I caught myself reacting instead of responding. And so I took a step back and I removed the emotion from the situation. And the emotion was, this is something that I've always wanted. But the fact of the matter is, it's not going to be available until a particular time that doesn't work for me. And so then I had to take a step back, and instead of becoming emotional and going like, okay, this, that, and the other, getting upset at them and saying like, this, that, like you guys were supposed to, this is irresponsible, and judging and judging and judging. I took a step back and said, okay, well, the realtors didn't know this. They advertised the place as moving ready. The owner has the right to change their mind. I have the right to be disappointed. But clearly, if it was meant for me, this wouldn't have happened. Now, you can make the argument that I could have, if I really, really wanted the place, I could have ate it. I could have eaten it and just said, okay, fine, I'll put my things in storage. I'll come back in January and then I will force this to work. But once again, I am not that person. From birth to now, I am the kind of person that I've been conditioned to react in a particular way. The path where I obliged and ate it and went along with what the landlord wanted, even though I'm a paying customer and that's not what I want, made me uncomfortable in my chest area and made my skin crawl to think about compromising in that way. And so instead, I let it go. I didn't push. I think I called a couple of times and they're like, it's 50-50 that she takes this flat or through the winter, through Christmas. And so I had to let it go. I called again and I said, look, I now have to stay here for Thanksgiving. I'm missing Thanksgiving with my family. I need you to find me something else that's available tomorrow. And I ended up finding a separate flat the very next day that was £1,000 less than what they actually listed it for, and they were willing to accept my offer. And it did end up, in a way, checking a lot more boxes than the other place, that if I would have held on to it and tried to force it, it would have actually been less than what I ended up getting, or something that it wouldn't have met my needs as much as the place that I actually did end up getting. And there's a lesson there. Like, you have to feel these things. Once again, could I have forced myself to behave in ways that are not typical of me? Absolutely. But then I probably would have ended up on a path that maybe I didn't want. There's sometimes I do have to do things that are uncomfortable to shift me into a different path. If I look 10 steps ahead, because like I said, I treat life as a chess game, I try to look 10 steps ahead. But what I saw was a landlord who was dishonest and inconsiderate, and they lied. So despite me wanting something really strongly, I couldn't ignore all of these other things and push to get something that ultimately long term would not have served me compared to a landlord who was willing to compromise to see long term and to work with people that ultimately met his goals. And the lesson I kept learning this past week and a half was that good enough is good enough. A lot of landlords that have flats for rent, they are not willing to bring down their price. They're hopeful that this perfect person will come along and will pay them what they want for their flat. And what ends up happening is that these flats end up literally just sitting open because, well, there's so many properties at the particular price point that they think should be, people should be paying for that, that these flats end up sitting to the point where they stink. Because when you leave a flat in London unoccupied for months and months, or something about the water or something like that, but literally could cause legionnaires. The entire apartment ends up stinking. You walk in and you can tell that the flat has not been occupied or checked in on in months. It just stinks. And so they ruin the value of the property because they're not willing to concede or to give up just a bit or just to take what life did give them and work with it. They're holding out to this ideal instead of just taking what's on the table now. The same thing has happened to me with trading. Instead of just taking what is right in front of me, right? If I see myself getting profit, a lot of the time when I've lost is because I saw myself getting profit and I hoped it would keep going. If you see money on the table, it may not be this number that you have in your head. Take it because it was more than the zero that you had before going in, or you end up with a loss. I don't know who needs to hear that, but that was the lesson I got. And that was why the flat that I did end up finally in made sense because it seemed to be more aligned on a deeper level with the underlining lesson that I was learning. Bird in hand worth more than two in the bush. And this landlord understood it. Maybe this other landlord from the first flat thought, well, I found this person easily. I'll find somebody else. And I won't be surprised if that flat ends up just sitting there. Or they end up with somebody who does get it, but they just squat and they don't pay or they refuse to move. But that's not my issue, right? To go back. So the liberation you seek. This is what GPT says. 1, recognize what's yours. Separate what truly matters to you from what you've been conditioned to care about. Ask, am I doing this for myself or for others? 2, let go of the uncontrollable. Other people's opinions, societal norms, or future uncertainties are often beyond your control, so stop giving them power over your decisions. 3, reclaim your energy. Direct your focus towards what fuels your passion and growth. Let go of obligations that feel meaningless or imposed. Let go of obligations that feel meaningless or imposed. What do you want? If something that you're chasing or appears to be chasing you isn't what you want, let go. If it's not meaningful, let go. 4, live authentically. Freedom begins when your actions align with your truth, not someone else's expectations. If you're tired of being a slave, it's because your spirit is calling for sovereignty. The path forward is not about giving up, it's about letting go of what no longer serves you. You don't need to fight for freedom, you need to choose it. Let it go, let it go. Here I stand. Right. You don't need to fight for freedom. You need to choose it. It actually takes more energy to fight against what you are than it is to choose to be free, to be what you are. If that's who you are, be that. It takes a lot less energy to just let things go and be. I don't want that. I don't want to do that. I want to do this and put my energy here. This is what I want. Can you do that? Okay. No, that's fine. Fuck off. Respectfully. You see that in the work of artists, not all of them. Some of them maybe stay confined their whole lives, and some of them maybe just use art in a different way. It's therapeutic. They just like creating beauty for the sake of beauty. That's me. I just love beauty for the sake of beauty. I like the way to rest the mind. And so I probably might have some esoteric themes that creep up here and there, but for the most part, my focus is not this intense and violent rebellion against the art world. That's not me. Because a lot of these artists were also classically trained. So that is the machine that they're raging against. I am self taught. So there is no machine to rage against. I just like beauty for the sake of beauty. I want to create even more and more and more beautiful faces that when you stand and look, you can't look away. Like you're literally just trapped, like visually. I saw a video that was saying that when you are looking at um, original art, not prints, not copies, but original art, there's a part of your brain here that gets activated, it gets stimulated, it does something to you. And it's like a part of your brain that works as like self recognition or something like that. And I just found that to be very interesting. You know, remember I said a couple episodes ago that artists they create their work and they put bits of their soul into these pieces. It's a type of magic, a kind of transmutation, if you will, if that's even a word, transmutation. Yeah, alchemy, even magic, maybe even technology to store yourself in bits of canvas and paint. Homunculus, even we're making little homunculuses, and so yeah, so it's not a rebellion for me. Like Beethoven, my friend and I had this discussion. My friend Matt, the physicist, and he was saying that even one of his was it no, it was Mozart's. One of his sonatas was just it was brilliant. There was violence in it, and if you know the story of Mozart, you can understand why he's rebelling against that work because it wasn't necessarily what he wanted to do, not in that way, you know. And I think he fell out with his father, so that is that rage. But my work is not something I do because I was pushed into it and there's no oppression there. In fact, the reason why I paint figuratively is because abstract art is so prevalent today. So you could say that that's my rebellion. And so rather than going more abstract, I'm becoming more and more and more and more and more real, you know, maybe even surreal, and playing into more of that. But I like form, but that obsession with form is in a way still a rebellion because of the fact that throwing paint on a canvas right now or having these sort of formless things um, is more the status quo. And it's my nature to say, fuck that. Anyway, there is something to be said about being free. Not in the way that you think. You can still be imprisoned, but be free within the prison. If we are imprisoned by fate, if we are imprisoned by our destinies, if we are imprisoned by the life paths that we find ourselves in, horoscopes and natal charts and all that other nonsense. Like if you are in fact in prison, you can still rebel. You could still push against it. Timothy Leary was imprisoned unfairly. They planted drugs on him because he was pushing for LSD as therapy and he was having success in changing people's minds. And of course, the government didn't like him. So he ended up with like, I think a 22-year jail sentence for having like a bag of weed in his car, which makes no sense because he was an LSD doctor, not marijuana. So it was definitely a plant. But even when he was in prison, he made the best of the situation he found himself in and worked with other prisoners and gave them therapy and meditated. And he said, you can imprison my body, but you cannot imprison my mind. So you just go to other worlds while his body was contained in ours. That's an artist. So I'll say this again and I'll leave you with that. When I talk about artists, anytime you hear me talking about artists on this podcast, I'm not talking about those who create, although this is fun. And you can purchase this shirt. I'm pointing to my shirt right now for those who are listening. It says Heartless, and he's holding a little heart in his hand. He pulled it out of his chest. It's a gingerbread man. The gingerbread man is heartless, and he's holding a little heart. He pulled it out of his chest. It's great for Halloween, great for Christmas, great for Valentine's Day. Actually, any time of the year, really. Shameless plug. But it's not about what you create. Your life can be a work of art. Your body can be a work of art. You, as a persona, can be a work of art. You do understand that, right? It's about creating. And creating, maybe not just by pushing against pre-existing rules, but maybe also by developing your own rules, your own morality, your own sense of order in which chaos can form. That is also an option. Anyway, thanks for watching.